Welcome to the podcast, Prabha.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
Good, very good, very good. I still have one for the year.
Excellent. So, we've been talking about this for a while now, and in fact, I wanted to do a podcast with someone who's ex-management consulting,
Okay.
primarily to get an understanding of what exactly happens within a setup of management consulting, because we have a very binary view, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and most of it is from the news and LinkedIn these days, rather, where you have so much of content about what McKinsey or BCG is doing, right?
Right.
As well as someone from the EV space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I've got you. All right. So we are best of both the worlds. So the way I want to do this is that we'll do it in two parts, right? The first part is where we talk about your journey and you navigating the management consulting world.
All right.
And the second part is your current role at
Right.
Indika and the EV space overall, right? Before we get into the management consulting piece, if you could just briefly introduce yourself for our audience.
Okay. So I'm just glad to tick both the boxes. Uh, uh, Quick background: I did my bachelor's in Mr. Biotech. I spent a lot of time on genetic engineering and ended up being a software engineer, having studied engineering in India. That's the default mode. And I was a software engineer for about uh, 7 years or so. And I was looking for a career change. And back then, consultants were hiring technologists a lot. Back in 2014, I had no idea about what consulting was. All right. 2014, I had an opportunity to either join PayPal, who's like known tech and all that, and McKinsey, right? Which is I had no idea who McKinsey was.
Hmm.
And I asked one of my mentors, and he said, "Which of this scares you the most?" Okay, this one is a black box. I have no idea what's going to happen if I go in there. I said, "Why don't you try it for a year? If things don't work out, you'll always go back there." So then I joined McKinsey, and it took me all over the world, plus all the way to Jakarta now. And in between, on the side, I did some course in psychology, masters in psychology, because that's something that I'm passionate about. Yeah, now I'm playing the role of chief strategy officer to build the EV ecosystem under the Indika group.
Sure. How long were you with McKinsey?
About close to 9 years.
Close to 9 years.
And 2.5 years is as a core technologist, writing code, tech leading, architecting, and all that. Then there is a pivot to proper consulting track. Of that, I was doing about 4.5 years. Right?
Okay.
So that's a good stretch of.
Sure. So tell us, what exactly do management consultants do?
In one line, it's problem solving.
Okay.
That's it, right? Problem solving. Now, that can take a variety of shapes, and typically consultants are known to solve strategy problems, right? Where there are multiple options available. How do you define a problem in a good enough way and collect data, analyze data, prioritize your solution space in a way that makes business sense? That's majority of strategy consulting, right? It's ambiguity, but then you have a set of tools and techniques and process that allows you to crunch it in a short time frame and come out with some recommendation. That's the majority part of it. But over time, what happened was even clients to consultants started asking, "You give me a PowerPoint presentation, right? So, and you expect me to deliver this dollar number over 5, 8, 10 years, and you are long gone."
Hmm.
And things keep changing, right? Then consultants also started getting into the point of either implementing those recommendations and start doing more transformations. It's just the commercial construct, everything got changed to a point where strategy is a portion of the portfolio of what consultants do. Transformation is another part. And in some cases, execution and building the businesses and all that comes, right? So that's the big part. But underlying all that, the core tenet is problem solving and communication.
Hmm.
That's what people get trained on, drilled, instilled, regardless of the topic, regardless of the industry, geography. The toolkit is how do we solve problems? How do we communicate the ideas that we crystallized based on analysis.
Sure. Okay. Uh, at what point do you think companies engage with management inside?
That's an interesting one. I have seen many different reasons why companies engage consultants. Uh, One is there is an overwhelming amount of data and uncertainty that boards and CEOs want to bring in some structural way to approach it, right? And this happens in pivotal moments of a company, usually. Either the industry is going through a stress or the company is expanding beyond their core capacity,
Hmm.
uh, or they are diversifying into new areas of which they don't have the expertise in.
Hmm.
Then they would engage a consultant to say, help us figure out, because I don't have the capacity or the capability to understand or make sense of what's happening. So to bring your expertise and your toolkits and all that, crystallize things for us, right? And then allows a thought partner for the board and the CEOs to say, ask questions, probe deeper, and turn around faster,
Hmm.
right? So that's usually the times where people, for example, 2016 and 17, analytics and data and all that becoming big.
Big data.
Correct.
Hmm.
And banks and large institutions, manufacturing organizations are like, hey, what do we do something with it? Because I don't have that capability in house to advise me on that. And I don't even know who to recruit, what to expect. Right? I have never thought about it. It's a new thing. What do we do with it? Then, consultants collect their expertise globally and bring in outside experts and all that and say, oh, here is how to think about it.
Hmm.
And here are the things to watch out for. And here is how you would go about it. And here is what it could mean for the business. Right. So that's typically what happens. We are at a pivotal moment either for growth or for crisis.
Hmm.
Then people are like, oh, things have changed. Now,
But is it mostly during the growth, or it's mostly during the crisis, or it's a mix of both?
it's a mix of both, because regardless of where the macroeconomic conditions are, some companies are growing, some are struggling, right? And it's a mix. It also varies by uh, industries and geographies. Resource rich countries like Indonesia would have more dependency on commodity price fluctuations.
Hmm.
In a bad year, let's say coal price goes down or nickel price goes down, palm oil price goes down, then they're like, how do we optimize? What can we do? Right? In a boom cycle, they're like, now I have extra cash. Where can I put it?
Sure.
How can I multiply it? And geographically as well, because regulatory landscape, political landscape changes the business assumptions, right? Even the business remains the same, the assumptions are now different. Now, what does it mean? And whether we continue this trajectory or should we do something differently? Right? So, those are the times. So, even on a bad year macroeconomically, some companies are
Going. True.
yeah. So it's not as straight.
True.
And as consultants, we would love to do more growth projects, right? Because then everybody is learning and we get to create stories and impact that is positive and all that. But crisis is a different kind of learning, right? Because there is a pressure point, there is an absolute dollar number at the end of it. There is no fluff, recommendations, no assumptions and all that.
Yeah.
At the end of the project, there is impact or not impact.
Yeah. And impact is clear.
Impact is clear.
Sure. So I'm making an assumption. Just correct me if I'm wrong. Typically, the consultants are engaged by the board or the CEO. Is that
Typically, yes.
typically yes? But then uh, most of the work is done by the middle management, right? And I'm not sure. Do they have any resistance towards outside consultants? How does that relationship work?
So the ideal scenario is that the CEO, let's say, to make it simple, right? The CEO has a vision or a problem, whichever you want it, and they believe that they need an external perspective, right, on how to address this because they already have the internal perspectives, right? Ideally, the CEO aligns the organization saying that here is where we are and here is a reason why we are bringing somebody in. And here is how the outcome of such an engagement is beneficial for all of us and aligns the incentives and all that uh, so that the study goes smooth, right? The project goes smooth. Oftentimes, the organization is so complex and the need is so urgent that there is not enough time for them to answer every question from everybody. Then consultant get thrown into the project and say, hey, now here is your problem, right? And figure out a way to fix it. And their resistance happens for a few reasons. One, uh, people think that this is not my goal. This is not my KPI. It's the board's KPI. And you are now bothering me to spend more time while I have my own day job to do.
Correct.
Right. So that's typically one. The other is they also don't trust the capability of the team. Say that I've been doing this for decades now. Right. Now you are coming in and telling me that how to do my job with very limited understanding of our organization, our capabilities, challenges, and all that. You are coming in with, oh, here is what worked for this company. Why don't you try it? Uh, and there, the credibility and the trust is a little less, right? And that leads to more friction as well. And usually, there are ways and means of how we overcome those resistance. Ideally, and not even ideally, right? Almost always, if the counterparts at the working level don't trust the team, don't trust the recommendation, of course, whatever the CEO wants to get done doesn't get done. Which means that part of the expectation of the CEO is also that align my working team towards this goal.
Towards this goal. You mentioned that there are some means by you go about this alignment.
Right.
Very curious. What are these?
So, day one of training, when I joined McKinsey, I'm sure equivalent exists in other places as well. The first message to us is release your agenda. When you talk to a client, forget your agenda. Understand the client's agenda. What do they want to do? Right. That's the number one thing. And that is true at all levels of consulting. Anytime we forget that rule, projects don't go well. That's number one.
Okay.
And then there is a tendency to say that, oh, I only have 3 months to deliver this impact. I don't have time for that.
Correct.
It will guaranteed won't get that. Right? That's number one. The second is consultants get trained on how to build relationships, right? Not in a transactional sense, saying that, hey, if I do this and you do this, you get promoted, I get promoted. It doesn't work, right? Relationships meaning that as a consultant, I need to make my client counterpart successful. End of story. Because it's a relationship driven business. And ideally, if we want to stay as consultants for 10, 15 years, our counterpart on day one will end up being, the C-level in places, right?
Yeah.
Or they might end up joining us or we join them.
Correct.
Then the relationship has to be protected at all costs,
right?
Between delivering impact and our projects versus saving a relationship, relationships take priority. Right? Now, how to build relationship is the toolkit, right? One is how do you prove that you are a credible person to do the job goes a long way. Once you prove it, and credibility is not only expertise. Credibility is how do you help the other person learn? How do you listen to them? How do you solve their problems? Are you attuned to what they see as challenges? All right. And do they trust you? Because it's very easy to lose trust in a consulting setup because if your loyalty is divided, then trust is gone. So can you navigate that knife's edge walk? Builds trust. Now, the question is how quickly can you build the trust and deliver value is where we spend a lot of time learning on the job and say, oh, this person, this is the motivation, and this is their challenges. Here's help. Right. So usually that one. Right? Forget about our agenda, make the other person successful. And through that, it will always happen that our project is also become
Sure. Why do you think management consulting firms get so much of flake on on social media and everywhere these days, to be honest. Why do you think that happens?
I think to your earlier question, right? When board or leadership, senior management call us during a crisis, uh, the recommendations are to cut costs, right? In the past, historically as well, now we have social media, it gets exploded. But even in the past, and there is also this books about when like Indika has a town and all that, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Let me probably put this in three buckets.
Sure.
Yeah. Bucket number one is a consultant recommendation is seen always through a, a monetary lens,
Okay.
right? And as such, the relationships and the organizational dynamics and all of that, people tend to see of it as you know uh, either binary or too calculated
Hmm.
without empathy.
Hmm.
That's the perception, right? And what's worse is there are few consultants and few clients who actually operate that way for their own
Okay.
reasons, right? For their own motivations and all that. There
Yeah.
are a few which in the past have done it, and in the future there will also be able to
Sure.
right, who prioritize that over everything else,
Hmm.
and that causes one set of perceptions, and these get a lot more attention as well. Right, that's number one. And the second reason is the expertise part. Right, so you are an MBA grad, have mostly not set foot in the business context or ran a large conglomerate or an enterprise for a longer period of time, where what gives you the credibility to come and talk about that industry, that problem?
True.
Right? That's usually seen at the working level, right? And that's also valid, but at the same time, it also shows that the value of what consultants bring is not fully understood.
Hmm.
All right. So that's the second reason. Expertise comes into question, right? And the third reason is, as I said, ideally, the management explains the context of when a consultant comes in, what is explained to. Often they don't,
Hmm.
right? Then it creates a three-way distrust, saying that, hey, you got a consultant in, what are you supposed to do? And these cases, I don't trust them, and they're telling me how to do my job. And what does that mean between you and me? So management and operating level, why won't you?
Sure. Sure. So, I mean, your entry into the consulting world is comparatively very different than most of the others, wherein they come from grad schools,
Right.
they come from MBAs, and then they enter into the consulting business, wherein you have gone from being an engineer
Hmm.
and you're not an MBA, right?
Not MBA.
You're not an MBA, right? Uh, what, according to you, basis your journey
Hmm.
as well as your peers, right? Uh, what are some key traits
Hmm.
for anyone who's aspiring to get into management consulting?
Right.
What should be the skill sets which one needs to develop?
Hmm.
And should one actually get into this, considering the work-life balance
Right.
and how what kind of impact it can have,
Right.
right?
So the traits, what I was able to draw on from my expertise as an engineer, coming to consultants, are one is objectively seeking to solve the problem. All right. Uh, Ask the right questions and bring rigor in asking those questions. Challenge your own assumptions. Look to data and how do you interpret the data. Those are all common things that you would hear, right? How do you make a decision?
Yeah.
Right. And supplement that with the toolkit that these consulting companies provide. Then are you able to engage a client counterpart and convince them of a recommendation which you fundamentally believe is better for the organization, right? So if you are excited by the notion of solving problems
Hmm.
and can go through religiously until it is objectively solved to your satisfaction, that's the core. If problem solving or ambiguity or convincing people of something that you believe in is not something that excites you, then consulting would be more draining.
Sure.
Because day in, day out, all you do is this particular
Mm,
part.
mm. Would it be difficult for an introvert to become a?
In fact, it's the other way around.
It's the other way around.
Right?
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, you think deeply
Hmm.
and you talk to one client counterpart who is your sponsor or who is key to make a project successful. An introvert are good at one-on-one, in-depth conversations, or they draw more energy by having those conversations. Right?
Hmm.
If it stimulates, if it is excites you and engages you, I find those conversations to be good. Right? I didn't like projects where I have to stand in front of like 30, 40 people and deliver a presentation. And that wasn't me. But for me, sitting down with the client, having a conversation and understanding and giving shape to the problem
Hmm.
and looking at options and trying to understand where they come from, those are exciting conversations.
Hmm. Where do you think these memes about McKinsey and BCG presentations have come from? Uh, some of them are really funny.
I follow those subreddits.
I follow those accounts as well, right? Yeah. There is sorry, before you answer, I mean, look, I've seen some of these presentations and they're really well made.
Yep.
Right. I mean, they really give you the picture
Right.
of what exactly, in most cases, they spell it out.
Right.
Beautiful charts, all sort of charts are out there. Uh, but yeah, I mean, where does this whole meme come from?
See, I would give an example, right? I was talking to one of our BOD members even 2 days ago on their experience of engaging consultants and all that. So the problem statement was, should he was in a previous company before, right? Should they buy a company, whether it will help their current business or not? Right? Now the end recommendation is a one sentence thing, saying that we should buy this company.
Right.
And for him to go to his CEO and for that CEO to go to the group chairman, the entire 3-month project was that one sentence out there. And the group chairman said yes within 2 minutes. All right. Now, this is a team of 5 consultants working 14-hour days for 3 months. Right. Now, if you look at it and you go and ask anybody who works in an organization and they say that, should you buy this company? Right. They can answer the question. 8 out of 10, they would say, yes, we should.
Yeah.
Right? Now, what difference does the consultant make is
Gives you the rationale.
all the rationale behind it, right? All the rigor behind it, all the assumptions behind it, and say that on what conditions it fails, bring other examples globally, and flush the whole thing out to the point that the CEO can say to the chairman with absolute confidence, saying that you should buy.
So it's more of reforming their own assessment.
Correct. Usually people have a
Via third party consult.
right. Usually CEOs are smart.
Yeah, I'm like, they are CEOs for a reason.
Yeah. And they already have a point of view.
Yeah.
Now, either they are looking to be challenged on that point of view or they are looking to increase their level of confidence.
Sure.
We're talking about binary and non-binary, right? Because a decision like that is never a yes or no question.
Correct.
Now, the CEO says, I am 60% confident we should buy. Now, how do you go from 60% to 90%?
Yeah.
Or you are only go from 60 to 65.
65. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
That's one part of it, right? The second is, it's also a way to build the entire team's confidence in that we should right? Answer all their questions, whatever the question may be, flush it out, right?
Sure.
And yeah, that's kind of, if you look at outset saying that, oh, should I cut costs? Of course you should cut costs.
Yeah.
Or should I improve my revenue? Of course you should improve your revenue. What goes behind that and what does it take to even roll out ideas? Everybody has ideas. Right? Every time we go week 1, whatever ideas we come up with, people who have been decades in the industry know them. Right? The question is, what makes a difference then? Right? So that's where the merit of consultant is, but that would never make a meme because it's too boring.
No, absolutely. 100% agree with you on that one. What about the whole work-life balance thing and management consulting? Do you get time to stare at your wife on Sundays?
Very timely.
Very timely, yes.
Right?
How was your experience?
So only on Sunday. So
Nice. How that was your experience?
it is time consuming.
It is time
It
consuming.
is time consuming.
Takes over your life.
If you don't control the time,
Hmm.
right? The nuances. Uh, Maybe I'll give you a bit of background on where the time goes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
As an early day consultant, as an analytics associate, right? You learn hard skills because you're trying to figure out Excel shortcuts, PowerPoint shortcuts
Hmm.
that allow you to do things faster.
Yeah.
While learning how do you build a financial model which is robust enough for a complicated scenario,
Right.
and talk to the clients and do research analysis and all that. There is less time, right? During the day, you're talking to clients, sitting with them, understanding all that. Evenings, you sit with the team and your manager and all that. They give you input. And when do you actually
Build it.
build it,
Hmm.
right? Because you are learning multiple things at the same time and you have to do your work. Right? So that's one part of it. And as you grow, the expectations and the responsibilities become more and more. Then you have to lead a team and you have to engage senior stakeholders and revolve. Your life revolves around their calendars,
Hmm.
right? Your
Correct.
partners and senior partners'
Yeah.
calendars.
Yeah.
You're juggling all that. For me, my experience was 60 to 70% of the time gets spent on aligning people's times and aligning everybody on the message.
Okay.
Like coming out of consulting,
Hmm.
I have a lot more free time,
Yeah.
right? Why? Because as an associate partner, I have to work with the team to make sure what they say is the right thing to say. And I have to align with the client counterparts. Do they buy into it? They have doubts or challenges to it, right? Then I need to bring my partner in and make sure that whatever we are saying, even if the client agrees, is the right thing to say
Yeah.
from a long-term strategy and board and all that point of view. And the senior partner will come in and bring in their own expertise from across the world and say
Hmm.
that, oh, this probably is not the right thing to say,
Hmm.
right? By the time it goes to the CEO, it has gone through 8 iterations,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Minimum.
Sure.
You know? And that's churn. The one pager gets iterated. And when do I actually refine it? Hmm. And you go to the board. Every 2 weeks, there is a steering committee meeting or board presentation. You present the whole thing. And they give a one-liner input,
Yeah.
which changes the whole thing again.
Yeah.
You redo it,
You redo it and you start from the same process. It begins again.
right? And ideally move forward, but sometimes you move backwards, right? That's what time gets spent. Now, the point of when I said if you don't control it,
Hmm.
right? There is a very real risk that you get excited by the problem so much that you go deeper and deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole instead of saying that, oh, now is my time to disconnect.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And you would have seen this phrase of insecure overachievers end up being consultant. The more insecure you are, more you want to spend time to address those uh, deficiencies in your own confidence.
Hmm.
Saying that if I iterate one more time, right, I'm a bit more confident. And then there is no end to it. Suddenly it's 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. And can become a pattern of sorts, right? You can get used to that kind of working as well.
Because it actually has a very strong feedback loop.
Yeah.
Because once you do it, and that gets you a recognition,
Yeah.
and you get rewarded with promotions and
This
titles,
is continuous aspiration to
correct,
up it up.
then your natural tendency is to the more time I spend, the better I am at it. So I'm saying that are there other ways to do it?
Yeah. And there are.
There are. And this is my sample size is very small. This happens with certain personality types more than other personality types,
Hmm.
right? And I have seen, let's say, people with engineering background have a way to come at it than people without an engineering background.
Hmm.
Or people who have been in the industry and then come into consulting have a different way of it. And also, just with life and age, there's a certain level of clarity that comes,
Yeah.
which you don't find. Those are things that you learn. It is baked into the growth model within an organization
Hmm.
where we expect people to figure it out.
Yeah.
And one key thing that almost all consulting companies teach is how do you stay inspired to do this day in, day out? Clock hours wise, you might spend more
Hmm.
than a normal 9 to 5 job. But then there is all sorts of notions, right? Is the quantity of time versus quality of time, and are you energized, right? Do you know when to step back? Are you observing your own operating model? Because in a consulting world, if your operating model doesn't change, it is very hard to get promoted.
Hmm. So you typically would do 80 hours, 90 hours a week?
Um,
Or that's a stretch.
like 60 is the average, right?
60 is the average. Okay.
60 is the average,
Okay.
right? Which means you go 80 or you go below 60.
Similar.
And it changes with the project,
Project cycle. Okay.
right?
Hmm.
If you are in a full project full time
Hmm.
and it's a 16-week project, then you know certain days in a week and
Yeah.
certain weeks in the project,
Yeah.
things will
You can preempt. You can preempt.
you can preempt, and then you manage your energy levels. Say that okay, this week I cannot spend more time. So if a let's say kid's birthday is coming up on the same week or a day before the board presentation, what am I going to do? Right? I either have the chance to talk to the team and spread it out.
Yeah.
So I'm not a critical thing there,
Oh.
or I can continue the way I continue,
Hmm.
and then the kid is unhappy.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about your new role. Not so new role anymore, I would say. It's been what, 17 months now?
Yep. Yep.
Perfect. So how has that transition been, and what is this whole role about?
So the role is this strategy role to create and build the EV ecosystem. Right. Our group has decided to diversify, and one core pillar of that group is electric vehicles. And in an environment where a lot of things need to fall in place for a shift in the industry to happen, we can either wait for somebody else to solve the problem, or we can try to solve the problem ourselves or accelerate that.
Sure.
So we have about a few companies now: an electric vehicle two-wheeler company, OEM, manufacture, distribute, and sell. We have a commercial vehicle distribution leasing fleet company. Right now, the EV ecosystem is a lot bigger than that. Like there is concepts of batteries, your electronics, and your maintenance and financing, and all that needs to be figured out.
Yeah.
While you are building a manufacturing heavy, service heavy industry, and how do you align day by day activities and goals versus medium to long term strategies and all that? Like
Sure.
fundraisers, investments, and all. My role is to give shape and structure to this problem. Right.
Sure.
Transition wise, even in McKinsey, I did some strategy, but not all strategy, and some tech and some transformation, some manufacturing, all that. Right. The few things that remain true, which allow me to settle into this job better. One, going back to the problem solving part, there is ambiguity. We need some structure and some ways to put data for us to get to a level of confidence. And the way I look at strategy or most life problems is I go back to this book, Tirukkural. I don't know if you know about it. This is a small poem book in Tamil, like couple of thousands of years old. And there is one poem that talks about the role of strategy. Right?
Okay.
It says the goal of strategy is to gain confidence.
That's interesting.
Right? So I'm like, okay, I have all these options in front of me. Should I get into set up a battery packing plant or battery cell plant? Should we invest? How much should we invest? Or should I not do it? And what are the risks? And how does it impact our existing businesses? People always have all these options. Oh, we shouldn't this much, that much. Everybody has a different points of. Now, how do we bring into a base level of confidence saying that yes, we should or no, we shouldn't? Needs to give structure. What parameters, what data sets will prove or disprove this hypothesis, right? That part has helped a lot. When an idea comes in, oh, there is this company from this country wants to come in and join with us. Okay. How do we even go through the thought process of saying yes or no?
No. Yeah.
And how do we get to a no faster?
Yeah.
Because yes, at the end of all the no, correct. That made life easier, where I don't know exactly what problem statement will be there tomorrow. Right? Regulations could change, commodity prices could drop, battery prices could go down, right? So things like that. Then my job becomes giving structure to the problem and bringing the rigor in solving that problem convincingly enough, and do that for a load of problems at the same time.
Sure. Interesting. Interesting. Where are we with within the EV landscape in Indonesia? I like, from whatever little understanding I have, I think it's still very, we are at nascency. That's my understanding. We are? Yeah, right. Okay.
Very much so.
Very much so. And there's so much of information overdose around EVs. Uh, it's just been a year and a half where AI has taken over that EV conversation. I think it's trying to just steal the limelight. But pre that, it was heavy on the EV and its impact overall. But I believe we have very little understanding, but a lot more information about EV, right? So let's dwell a bit more deeper on that, right? So from an Indonesia perspective, where exactly are we,
Right.
and what, according to you, should be the ideal next steps, and do we really need it?
Right.
Okay, so
To uh, to structure the information overload, right? We get a mixed, we get a lot of information on multiple parts of EV landscape, right? One is on the vehicle itself.
Yeah.
That cars, two-wheelers, commercial vehicles.
Yeah.
Right. And then there is the commodity landscape above it, right? Your nickel and lithium and cell and pack and all.
which goes into making an EV.
And the third is to your question of do we need it,
Hmm.
takes on an environmental aspect,
Yeah.
sustainability aspect,
Yeah.
as well as the end consumer aspect to saying how is it beneficial to the consumer.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Now the overload happens because every country is adopting this at a level and by structurally changing things on,
Correct.
let's say, incentives or regulatory or whatever.
True.
And it has gotten to a point where legendary OEMs themselves are trying to figure out how to deal with it.
Correct.
Uh, some of them painted themselves into a corner with their existing engine market, right? Then
Yeah.
shifting it means cannibalizing their core.
Yeah.
Right. And what they stood for as value proposition,
Hmm.
brand, the performance, and all that,
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily translate to electric vehicles. They are in that spectrum.
True.
And startups see this as an opportunity to disrupt an industry which doesn't happen normally every year.
Correct.
It's
Correct.
like once in a multi-decade
Opportunity. True.
when people try to bring in different advantages on how they can disrupt it. In the battery side, chemistry, cell, your big companies, LG, CATL, whoever, they're like investing billions into chemistry research,
Yeah.
structure research, form factor research, solid state, LFP, LMFP, NMC, and all that, right? And the OEMs themselves, there is enough research happening on the motors, the vehicle controllers, and all that. There's a lot of innovation happening because we see this as the future, right? And a big reason for me to shift from management consulting to here is I do see this industry has the biggest potential to be not necessarily majority of vehicles will be EVs in the near future, but in the next 10, 20 years, this has potential to be majority, right? And this is an opportunity to make it happen instead of watching it from the sidelines. Now, where are we in Indonesia context? Penetration wise, it's still small.
Sure.
Cars are a bit higher in terms of penetration and then two-wheelers. Commercial vehicles is super nascent for different challenges, right?
Charging infrastructure.
Correct.
So batteries.
If you talk to a customer, right? As an end customer, my goal is to go from point A to point B reliably and cheaply.
Yeah.
Now, they don't care about what chemistry, what EV, right? In some countries, point A to point B reliably and cheaply comes down to fuel prices.
Yeah.
Comes down to average commuting distance. Is two-wheeler or car your primary transport or not? America cars are primary. Europe is small enough.
How well is your city infrastructure or mobility infrastructure?
Correct.
I also feel it's heavily dependent on income powers and GDP as well. Right. I mean, also about the consciousness of the country when it comes to emissions.
Correct.
Where Europe is feels a lot more guiltier, for lack of better word.
More forward looking.
A lot more forward looking. You can put it that way as well. So it depends on all those factors. I completely understand. When we talk about a country like Indonesia, where the GDP isn't that high, it gets skewed, to be honest, GDP, because if you remove the top 5%, it's way lower, right? So averages out to be way lower. Uh, Not fuel rich, but not insanely rich. Does not do much of processing itself. So crude goes out and processed fuel comes in. Considering all this mixture of uh, various data points, right? When I look at from a consumer perspective, I see the market to be very small, right? When I look at from a purely consumer perspective, maybe two-wheeler, yes, but then again, what kind of lifespan are we talking about over here? Because if you look at non-EV vehicles, I mean, they last for a very 15 years bare minimum. And you're talking about someone who earns less than $200 a month, for him or her to look at EV with a lifespan of 5 or 6, which my understanding is what is today. The lifespan is
Most of the battery.
mostly into the batteries, and batteries are 70% of the vehicle's value after 5 6 years. Right. Now with all these data points, now where are we with Indonesia and EV?
You just made the case for management consultants.
Yeah, I am over here. Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. Let me give you the way I see this space. One, two-wheelers are about 6.1, 6.2 million vehicles sold every year. There are about 120 million vehicles on the road now. Cars, about a million or plus or minus, right? And to your point, from an end consumer point of view, more options, the better. Yeah. So previously I had like 4 OEMs, 5 OEMs, these models in this price bracket. Now I have doubled the number of OEMs.
Sure.
That's good. Now, one is, where are we now? Saying that I look at China and India on EV adoption, systematically promoting the adoption for a broader country's goal, right? There has been information about China subsidizing the manufacturing side and moving more towards an EV-friendly economy and all that, because they have a stronger reliance on oil, right? Which means a lot of forex and your inflation, everything is linked to the oil prices.
Correct.
And moving away from that help them, and they are resource rich as well, right? India is 2-3 years ahead in terms of EV adoption
To Indonesia.
India is 3 years ahead with all the steps, like government support, innovation happening, end user adoption, awareness, and all that. But India, we have multiple metros where your average commute distance and the requirement for a vehicle, two-wheeler, matches, and the price point is the only consideration. And the resale value, I'll talk about it separately. It's an important point of problem to solve.
Yes.
So it works, but then it hasn't gotten to a level where tier 2, tier 3 people look at a petrol vehicle and an EV and say, I want an EV. Not yet. Right?
It hasn't become sexy enough
Or
from a perception perspective.
correct, or reliable enough, or there's a lot of questions that they don't intrinsically understand. Right? Petrol vehicles, you can actually say, okay, how much mileage?
It's straightforward.
There is no equivalent lingo for EVs. Right? Am I getting value for money? That hasn't translated to common language to say, this is what X juta or this is what Y. Right? Now, second-hand value is an important problem. Life and the value. Right? On life, what gives me the confidence is there is enough research happening where the life will get better.
Okay.
There are two kinds of research happening. One is, how do we measure life itself? People are coming up with saying that the way you used to measure cell life, battery cell life, doesn't necessarily apply to EV, because life depends on usage and behavior of charging and all that. You can't do lab level cycles up and down and translate assets. Right? The second is chemistry wise, structure wise, prismatic cylindrical and all that. Enough companies are motivated to break to that. It's a matter of time. And we have seen that innovation happen in the context of, let's say, energy density. Right? When we started in 2021, LFP energy density was nowhere near NMC.
Hmm.
Right? NMC is significantly expensive than LFP, but we all went with NMC because you want top speed, you have to go NMC. But enough research happened on LFP now that the energy density is very close and 30% cheaper. Right? And lifestyle wise, safety wise, it's all better. Then we are like, okay, enough research happens that this is a matter of time. And you don't want to wait for that to happen. You have to start a bit early. When that happens, you catch the wave.
Hmm.
The other part about what is the residual value of the vehicle, right? Now it comes down to again quality of battery. As you said, battery 70%. Then how good the battery is determines how much value it will bring. But the challenge is the market makers for secondary markets, your agents, your second-hand dealers, or your brokers, those don't exist yet because there's not enough volume.
Correct.
Then it becomes a chicken and egg problem, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't sell more because secondary value is not established yet. It's not established yet because there is not enough vehicles coming.
Yeah.
Somewhere somebody has to break the cycle. And everybody's trying to figure out how do we do this in a way where we can guarantee to the customer that this is economical. Right? Now the conversation is less about, we tried that. We know mathematically total cost of ownership of an EV is cheaper than a petrol vehicle. It is. Over the lifetime, total cost of ownership, right? Which includes your fuel, maintenance cost and everything else. Including the residual value, whatever number you put in, it works out to be TCO cheaper compared to ICE vehicles.
But by what percentage? Averaged out? Ballpark?
Ballpark would be about 20 to 30%.
That's massive.
It is. Like commercial vehicles as well. We know the TCO works. That's why we are in this business. But the end customer don't think of it in a TCO lens. The end customer thinks about monthly how much I'm paying, including my loan payment, including my petrol, including my electricity cost, maintenance cost, right?
Yeah, because I mean, as soon as you say it's 20 to 30% cheaper, and you're taking a vehicle loan at 8% interest for 5 years, there goes 40%.
True.
But you're factoring in and still saying that it's cheaper.
TCO is cheaper.
TCO is cheaper. Factoring in the interest on the loan.
And assuming today's fuel prices, we're not assuming the fuel prices going up
eventually,
right? So then that is not normal for a non-economist to think that way.
And most of us are non-economists.
We are not. Ours is like, oh, upfront down payment I pay X juta, and monthly I pay Y juta, right? Then EVs are expensive that way. Because of that.
I see a lot more adoption, at least from Indonesia perspective, see a lot more adoption happening on B2B2C side, or B2B2B sides, B2B2M side, merchant, right? So you have the Grabs and the Gojeks of the world, wherein they are taking a large fleet and then giving it out to the drivers, right? And I'm pretty sure, I mean, these are some very smart guys, and they must have worked out the TCOs, and they must have worked out a mechanism wherein the OEM might replace it after 5 years or buy it at a discounted price or whatever. I mean, so from a commercial perspective, to me, to be honest, it makes a lot more sense.
It does,
right? Even from a large vehicle perspective, I'm pretty sure, because when it's businesses, there's a lot more study which goes into it, and then
the Excels are way more complex.
Yeah, and then you have the McKinseys of the world to help them out as well. But when it comes to the core consumers, the way I see it over here right now, at least in Indonesia, in my limited experience, I think it is just a few folks who are very fascinated by the tech, and of course are wealthy enough to afford. And most of them, they're not going for loans. I mean, they have the cash to buy, right? But I haven't seen yet a lot more everyday adoption happening on the consumer side yet.
Yes, that is true. And
that needs education. You feel it's an education problem?
It is
a reliability problem, education problem.
It's a combination.
Right?
Different segments and different price points have different challenges.
Sure.
Right? A 40 juta and above bike versus a 20 juta bike have a completely different problem.
Yeah.
So in any tech innovation, you have the cycle of early adopters,
Yeah.
And you will have like people giving up on it because it has problems. Then another wave of innovation happens, which goes to bigger adoption cycle, right? We see that happening in the EVs as well. So even in India, right, when I talk about early EVs, there is a lot of negative publicity about catching fire, service centers not being there, all that. But now those things have come down to a point where it is almost non-existent. Right? There are still quality issues, but then it doesn't generate as much as concern in people's minds, right? Now, and you are absolutely right that most people at the moment in Indonesia don't see EV as a primary bike. It's either a secondary bike or curiosity or weekend, like your daily commute. And when you ask customers, right, they usually say a few things, right? One, they say, I am worried about the range promise. Even though we say the range is like our of a product is 140-kilometer range, we know data, average consumer, 80th percentile consumer drives less than 50 kilometers. Right? So, but they still have the perception that what if I have to go extra?
Yeah, because with petrol, it's very clear. What if there's someone selling a bottle?
Correct. Yeah.
Just pour it in.
So one strategy is okay, swap stations versus fast charging stations.
Yeah.
So we debated a bit about swap and fast charge, and we are rolling out fast charging stations, right? More and more. We are saying, don't worry about. We have longer range for you to get through like 99.9% scenarios. For the 0.1% scenario, you can go and top it up.
So the human brain is attuned for that 0.1% scenario.
Like,
What if?
what if? All right. So then we are like, okay, is it really range you're worried about, or is it the ability to top it up?
Yeah.
Right? So it took us a while to figure out the nuance behind it, right? So then we are like, okay, if you're worried about the more fast charging stations you see, 5 minutes I can get to like 20, 30 kilometers or 15 kilometers, whatever it is, right? So that's one problem. The second problem is the initial sticker shock because the battery prices are still high. Projected to go down, but then it is high now. Right? So high enough for people to feel that, oh, for a comparative performance, I am paying higher price. Right? But what they don't understand is the TCO.
Yeah.
We know TCO works.
Yeah.
Then our challenge is innovations on business models. Like you see companies giving battery on subscription. Take out the cost of the battery, pay monthly.
Yeah.
Factor in your fuels expense, the electricity expense, you pay less. Right? That's our problem to work out, right? And say, oh, does it work out to be cheaper than owning a petrol vehicle on a monthly cost basis? There's a business model innovation happening.
Yeah.
Then there is technology innovations. Right? We are talking about how and all.
So basically, in summary, there's a lot of experimentation happening in how to increase the adoption. I would call it from a model perspective, from increasing adoption perspective, there's a lot of experimentation happening.
A lot of innovation happening in different
pockets as well.
And we are trying to figure out innovation on tech, innovation on commercial strategy, innovation on pricing, as well as the education we believe would be a byproduct of it. Because we can't teach people on all of this.
Yeah. True. Okay, final few questions. Who do you think is leading this whole EV race, US or China?
In terms of penetration, China for sure, right? The infrastructure, the end-to-end supply chain, all of that. China has done the car penetration significantly, and they are now onto commercial vehicles, including charging infrastructure, number of OEMs and all that. From that lens, China, absolute numbers is China escape, right? With US, the question is about, they have a lot of OEMs already, and China, it's all new OEMs.
Yeah.
Right? US doesn't see, my personal view is that the existing OEMs are hesitant. Right? Because the chicken and egg problem, China had strong motivation to solve it.
Correct.
So they subsidized the supply part.
Correct.
Right? So the demand picked up over time.
Yeah, I mean, you have a $10,000 EV by Xiaomi. I mean, at that price point, it's a no-brainer.
Right? But somebody has to subsidize. And there needs to be enough motivation, both from investors and from government, do that.
Sure. Even from innovation perspective, you feel China's innovating more on EV space?
I think the core innovations on batteries happened over the last 10 years and continues to happen, right? That probably is the significant innovation, I would say, which makes a big difference. Both from a performance point of view as well as from a cost point of view.
Sure.
And that's a function of scale as well. And China can absorb that. Right?
Sure.
So if you look at technology innovation wise, Europe and US have enough small innovations happening with startups on the battery side, recycling and all of that. But there isn't a cohesive
Industry innovation as such.
industry wide,
Hmm.
or there isn't enough incentives from regulators or the investors to make it happen.
Sure.
It's all isolated and pockets, and there is enough headwinds to move out, right? Because existing automakers, as I said, right, have created.
They're still reluctant, and I mean, they've created an ecosystem.
Because if you take an objective lens
Hmm.
and say that why would the customer care, sustainability is not an everyday consumer's problem.
Correct.
They are trying to solve their livelihood and jobs, and it is not a big enough problem as the industry has seen. Because if you say the sustainability is your main number one problem as a country, the bigger leverage will come from other areas than an individual changing their two-wheeler or car to an EV.
Correct.
From that also, there is a bit of a mismatch. Right?
Hmm.
To leave it to the consumers, they only think about cheaper A to B.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
That goes not fully in alignment with the current automotive world model, because you will take a lot of after sales and all the different things. And if you really want to solve the sustainability problem, right, a hybrid vehicle is probably a transitionary step before the EV ecosystem is more.
Correct. Correct. I mean, but to be honest, I don't buy that it is only for sustainability. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Perfect. This is good. Thank you so much, Prabha. Was pleasure having you. Thank you.